In the gleaming conference room of Hartwell Media Group, a heartbroken scholarship student was about to face his greatest betrayal. What started as a routine corporate acquisition took a shocking turn when Marcus Chen came face to face with the woman who had shattered his dreams 5 years earlier. Marcus Chen wasn't your typical tech mogul at 27. He had spent his life climbing from working-class roots to billion-dollar success, known for his ruthless precision in business deals. When he encountered Isabella Whitmore-Hartwell, sitting frozen in that boardroom, he had no idea this moment would unravel a web of manipulation that had stolen their future, leading to a reckoning that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her carefully constructed life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The black Tesla Model S Plaid pulled up to the gleaming glass tower with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes with absolute certainty. Marcus Chen sat in the back seat, his fingers drumming against the Italian leather as he gazed up at the 47 floors of Hartwell Media Group headquarters. 5 years ago, he'd stood outside these same doors as a broke college graduate, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the elite world he'd never belonged to moved in its gilded circles above him. Today, he owned it all, sir. Shall I wait? His driver asked, but Marcus was already stepping out, his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit moving with him like liquid shadow. The morning sun caught the subtle threads in the charcoal fabric. He adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a small indulgence that reminded him how far he'd traveled from the scholarship kid who'd worn the same 3 shirts throughout college. "No need, James. I'll be staying late tonight." Marcus's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made people listen without him having to raise it. "This is my building now." The words tasted strange on his tongue. My building. At 27, he was the youngest CEO to ever acquire a media empire worth $3.7 billion. The financial press had called it audacious. Business world called it genius. Marcus knew the truth. It was revenge, dressed up in quarterly reports and acquisition papers. The lobby buzzed with nervous energy as employees hurried past, their conversations dropping to whispers when they noticed him. Marcus caught fragments as he walked toward the elevator bank. "That's him, Technova's founder. Bought us out for cash? He looks so young. If they only knew what the last 5 years had cost him." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt both eternal and instantaneous. Marcus watched the numbers climb, each floor carrying him further from the boy he'd been and deeper into the man he'd become. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the executive conference room where his new empire awaited. But first, the memories. 5 years earlier, Eastwood University. Graduation night, the campus was alive with celebration, caps thrown skyward, and parents weeping with pride. Marcus stood alone beside the oak tree where he and Bella had shared their first kiss, his diploma clutched in one hand, and his heart shattered in his chest. "I thought I'd find you here." He turned to see her approaching in that blue dress he'd helped her pick out for the spring formal back, when he'd foolishly believed their future was intertwined. Isabella Whitmore moved with the same grace that had captivated him during their sophomore literature class, but now it felt like watching a stranger wear the face of someone he'd loved. "Congratulations on the summa cum laude," she said softly, stopping just out of reach. "You always were the brilliant one, apparently not brilliant enough." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but Marcus was past caring about politeness. "When did you decide? When did you choose him over us?" Bella's composure cracked for just a moment, and he saw the girl he'd fallen in love with, the one who'd stayed up all night with him in the library, the one who'd dreamed of changing the world together, and the mask slipped back into place. "It's not that simple, Marcus. You don't understand the pressures." "The pressures of what?" "Slumming it with the scholarship kid. Of having to explain to your mother why you're dating someone whose family owns a dry cleaning business instead of a media empire. That's not fair." Her voice broke slightly. "What we had was real. You know it was real. What we had," Marcus said, stepping closer, "was apparently not enough. Alexander Hartwell III comes from the right family, has the right connections, the right bank account. I get it, Bella. I do. I just wish you'd had the courage to tell me before I made a fool of myself thinking we had a future." For him then, her fingers barely brushing his arm before he pulled away. "Marcus, please no." He looked at her one last time, memorizing the face that had haunted his dreams and fueled his ambitions. "You made your choice. Live with it. But don't expect me to make it easy for you." He'd walked away that night and never looked back. Until now. The conference room was exactly as he'd imagined: mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling, windows offering a commanding view of the city. 43 department heads and senior staff members were already seated, their conversations dying as Marcus entered. He recognized some faces from the research his team had conducted during the acquisition. Financial projections, personnel files, performance reviews. He knew more about these people than they realized. Elena Rodriguez, his coup and closest friend, stood as he entered. At 31, she commanded respect through sheer competence. And the kind of sharp intelligence that had helped build Teknova from a two-person startup into a global powerhouse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her burgundy suit spoke of success earned rather than inherited. "And gentlemen," Elena announced, her voice cutting through the remaining whispers, "please welcome Marcus Chen, CEO of Teknova Industries and your new Chief Executive Officer." The applause was polite but uncertain. Marcus took his position at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the room. These people had no idea that 6 months ago he'd stood in this same building as a visitor, watching through security footage as Alexander Hartwell III stumbled drunkenly through a board meeting. They didn't know that every move since then had been calculated to bring him to this moment. "Thank you for the warm welcome," Marcus began, his tone professionally cordial. "I know this transition has created uncertainty, and I want to address that directly. Teknova's acquisition of Hartwell Media Group represents an opportunity to merge traditional media expertise with cutting-edge analytics and digital innovation." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. Financial controllers, marketing, directors, editorial staff, human resources, and there, in the third row, partially hidden behind the broad shoulders of the legal department head, Isabella Whitmore-Hartwell. Her auburn hair was shorter now, styled in a sophisticated bob that framed her face. She wore a navy blazer that he recognized as expensive, but not ostentatious, the kind of careful balance. She'd always struck between her family's expectations and her own sensibilities. For a moment, their eyes met across the conference table, and Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that he'd spent 5 years learning to suppress. She looked older, more refined. But underneath the professional polish, he could see shadows of exhaustion around her green eyes. The newspapers had been kind in their coverage of Alexander's recent difficulties, but Marcus knew the truth. 3 failed business ventures, mounting debts, and whispers of infidelity that grew louder by the month. Bella's lips parted slightly, and he watched the color drain from her face as recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her fingers tightened around the pen she'd been holding, and for a moment Marcus thought she might actually flee the room. Instead, she held his gaze with the same stubborn courage he remembered from their college debates. Even in shock, even facing the ghost of her past choices, Isabella Whitmore refused to show weakness. It was one of the things he'd loved about her. One of the things he'd never quite been able to forgive. "As we move forward," Marcus continued, his voice never wavering, "each department will undergo comprehensive review. We'll be examining efficiency, redundancies, and strategic alignment with Teknova's vision for the future. Some positions will be eliminated. Others will be restructured. And some," his eyes found Bella's again, "will be given opportunities to prove their value in ways they never expected." The room shifted uncomfortably. Several people exchanged worried glances, but Marcus's attention remained fixed on the woman who'd once promised to change the world with him. She'd recovered from her initial shock and was taking notes with apparent calm. But he could see the slight tremor in her hand. "Ms. Rodriguez will be distributing detailed packets outlining the review process," Marcus announced. "Department heads should expect individual meetings beginning tomorrow morning. Marketing will be our first priority." He paused again, savoring the moment. "Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell, please see me after this meeting concludes." The use of her hyphenated name felt deliberate, almost cruel. a reminder of the choice she'd made, the name she'd taken, the life she'd built in his absence. Bella's pen stilled on her notepad, but she didn't look up. "That concludes our introduction," Marcus said, stepping back from the table. "Welcome to the future of Hartwell Media Group, or as will be known moving forward, Technova Media Division." As the room began to empty, conversations resuming in hushed, worried tones, Marcus remained standing at the head of the table. Alina approached him, her expression unreadable. "Subtle as a freight train," she murmured, low enough that only he could hear. "Are you sure this is how you want to play it?" Marcus watched as Bella gathered her materials with deliberate slowness, clearly waiting for the room to empty before their confrontation. She'd always been smart that Wayne ever wanted to provide gossip material for others. "I've waited 5 years for this conversation, Alina. I'm exactly where I want to be." But as the last stragglers filed out and Bella finally looked up from her notepad, Marcus wondered if that was entirely true. The woman sitting across from him wore success-like armor, but underneath he could still see traces of the girl who'd chosen security over love, expectation over authenticity. The question that had driven him through countless 8-hour days and sleepless nights remained. Was he here for justice? Or was he simply the kind of man who'd spent 5 years and $3 billion just to win an argument? Bella stood slowly, smoothing her skirt with hands that no longer trembled. When she spoke, her voice carried the same melodic quality that had once recited poetry to him in darkened dorm rooms. "Hello, Marcus. I suppose congratulations are in order?" Marcus smiled then, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell, we have a lot to discuss." The conference room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of a city that had no idea. Two people were about to renegotiate the terms of a heartbreak 5 years in the making. Outside, the sun continued its arc. Across the Manhattan skyline, indifferent to the collision of past and present happening 42 floors below the clouds, Marcus had returned, and this time he held all the cards. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. Marcus remained standing at the head of the mahogany table while Bella slowly gathered, her papers, her movements deliberate and controlled. The afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished surface that separated them, a metaphor that wasn't lost on either of them. "You always did prefer the dramatic entrance," Bella said finally. Her voice steady despite the slight tremor Marcus detected underneath. She clicked her pen closed with unnecessary force. "Though I have to admit, buying an entire media empire just to make a point seems excessive, even for you." Marcus slipped his hands into his pockets, the gesture casual but calculated. "Who says this is about you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. They both knew it was a lie, but the pretense mattered. It was the difference between a personal vendetta and a business acquisition, between the heartbroken boy he'd been and the calculating man he'd become. "Of course not," Bella replied, standing and smoothing her skirt. "Though I suppose the marketing department review being moved to first priority is simply a coincidence. Market research indicates that traditional media companies struggle most with digital integration in their marketing divisions. It's a logical starting point." His tone was purely professional, but his eyes never left her face. "Unless you're concerned about your performance metrics?" Bella lifted her chin with that same defiant grace he remembered from their college. "Debates? My performance speaks for itself." The Meridian campaign increased engagement by 43%, and the Hartford Industries rebranding brought in $12 million in new revenue. Impressive. Marcus moved around the table, closing the distance between them with predatory patience. "Though I notice you didn't mention the Blackstone account. That was less successful." Her composure flickered for just a moment, a brief tightening around her eyes that most people would miss. Marcus had spent 2 years studying every micro-expression on that face, memorizing the tells that revealed when Isabella Whitmore was fighting to maintain control. "The Blackstone campaign faced unforeseen market conditions," she began. "It failed because Alexander interfered." Marcus's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. He demanded changes to the messaging to favor his personal business. "Relationships, despite your objections, sound familiar?" The color drained from Bella's face. and Marcus felt a familiar surge of satisfaction mixed with something darker regret. Perhaps, or the ghost of tenderness he'd thought he'd buried. She'd always been beautiful when cornered, her intelligence sharpening to a fine point. "My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities," she said, her words careful and measured. "Doesn't it?" Marcus moved closer, near enough, to catch the faint scent of her perfume, different now, something sophisticated and expensive that spoke of the life she'd chosen. When your husband's poor judgment directly impacts your campaigns, when his reputation affects every client relationship you attempt to build, that's enough. Bella's mask finally cracked, revealing a flash of the passionate woman he'd fallen in love with. "Whatever game you're playing, whatever point you think you're making, I'm making no point at all." Marcus's smile was cold and professional. "I'm simply outlining the challenges facing your department, challenges that will need to be addressed if you want to keep your position." The threat was delivered with surgical precision, wrapped in corporate speak but unmistakably personal. Bella stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her brilliant mind working, calculating odds, measuring risks. "I see." Gathered her materials with renewed composure. "When is my review?" "Scheduled tomorrow. 9 a.m., my office." Marcus stepped back, creating professional distance again. "I trust that won't interfere with your domestic obligations." Bella's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course not. Will there be anything else?" "No. That will be all, Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell." She nodded curtly and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor with staccato precision. Marcus watched her leave, noting the set of her shoulders, the careful control in her gait. She paused at the threshold without turning back. "For what it's worth, Marcus, I'm sorry for all of it." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with the ghosts of their conversation and the familiar ache that no amount of success seemed capable of healing. 6 hours later, Bella's penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park, a wedding gift from Alexander's father that had felt like a golden cage from the moment she'd moved in. Now, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of wine she couldn't taste, she watched the city lights twinkle like fallen stars. Her phone buzzed against the marble countertop. Sarah Kim's name flashed on the screen. "Saw the news," Sarah said without preamble, when Bella answered. "Technova bought Hartwell Media. Please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." Bella closed her eyes, pressing the phone against her ear. Sarah had been her roommate at Eastwood, the only person who'd witnessed the full scope of her relationship with Marcus and the devastation that followed its end. "He's my boss now," Bella said simply. "Jesus Christ, Bella. Of all the media companies in all the world." Sarah's voice trailed off. "How did he look? Older, fatter?" "Please tell me success hasn't been kind to him." Despite everything, Bella found herself almost smiling. "He looks successful, very successful, and very, very angry." "Well, shit. Are you going to quit and go where?" "With Alexander's reputation in free fall, I need this job more than ever. Besides," Bella straightened her shoulders, even though Sarah couldn't see her, "I'm not going to run away. Not again. It's either very brave or very stupid, probably both." The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the wine glasses in the cabinet. Alexander was home. "Have to go," Bella whispered into the phone. "Call me tomorrow after your meeting, and Bella, be careful. Some wounds never heal properly." Bella ended the call just as Alexander stormed into the living room, his tie askew and his usually perfect hair disheveled. Alexander. Hartwell III was still handsome in the way that came with good genes and better dentistry, but alcohol and stress were beginning to show around his eyes. "Well," he said, pouring himself 3 fingers of scotch from the crystal decanter, "this day just keeps getting better. First, the Pemberton deal falls through. Then I find out some tech startup kid has bought my family's company." He knocked back half the drink. "Do you know anything about this Marcus Chen person?" Bella kept her expression carefully neutral. "He's young. Brilliant, apparently. Built Technova from nothing. It's probably some diversity hire who got lucky with venture capital." Alexander muttered, settling into his leather chair with the casual arrogance that had once seemed charming, but now grated against her nerves. "These tech brothers are all the same, no real business sense, just hype and algorithms. Bella said nothing, sipping her wine and watching her husband underestimate the man who now controlled his family's legacy. Marcus had many faults, but lack of business acumen wasn't among them. I'll need to schedule a meeting with him, Alexander continued. Show him how things really work in this industry. Maybe offer to stay on as a consultant, help him navigate the traditional media landscape. I'm sure he'll appreciate your insights, Bella said carefully. Alexander's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen with the expression of a man expecting bad news. His face darkened as he read. The quarterly reports are worse than expected. Dad's going to have my head. He looked up at Bella with calculating eyes. You still have connections in the marketing world, right? With friends who might be looking for experienced leadership? The request hung between them, unspoken, but understood. Alexander needed her to network for him, to use her professional relationships to salvage his reputation. It was the same pattern that had defined their marriage, his failures becoming her responsibilities. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'll make some calls, Bella heard herself say, the words tasting like ash.
Good girl.
Alexander smiled with the patronizing warmth that had once made her feel special, but now made her skin crawl. I knew I could count on you. As her husband returned to his scotch and his complaints, Bella stared out at the glittering city and thought about the boy who'd once promised to change the world with her. Tomorrow, she would face the man he'd become, knowing that her entire, carefully constructed life balanced on the edge of his judgment. Some wounds never healed properly, Sarah had said. But some wounds, Bella was beginning to think, were meant to be reopened. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus stood in his corner office on the 52nd floor of the Technova building, staring out at the lights of Manhattan spread below him like a circuit board. Alina entered without knocking, a privilege earned. Through 5 years of unwavering loyalty and brutal honesty, how did it go? She asked, settling into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. As expected. Marcus didn't turn from the window. She's still remarkable, and still married. Marcus, I know what you're going to say. He finally faced her, his expression unreadable. That this is a mistake. That I'm letting emotion cloud my judgment. That I should fire her and be done with it. Actually, I was going to say that you looked like you were about to either kiss her or fire her, and I wasn't sure which would be worse for the company's stock price. Marcus laughed despite himself. Dry humor had gotten him through. More crises than he cared to count. She apologized, he said quietly. Did she mean it? I think so. But it doesn't change anything. Alina studied his face with the analytical precision that made her invaluable as both a business partner and a friend. Doesn't it? Marcus, you bought an entire media company. You restructured your entire corporate strategy around acquiring this specific target. Her apology doesn't change anything. Then what exactly are you hoping to accomplish? Marcus turned back to the window, watching the late-night traffic flow through the illuminated canyons below. I want her to understand what she threw away. I want her to see what we could have built together, and then what? It's a question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had spent 5 years planning this moment, but he'd never truly considered what came after revenge. What did victory look like when the spoils included a woman who'd once held his heart? I don't know, he admitted. That's what worries me, Alina said softly.
The Marcus I know always has a plan. The fact that you don't suggest this isn't
really about business at all? Outside, the city hummed with the restless energy of 8 million dreamers and schemers, each pursuing their own version of success. Somewhere among those lights, Isabella Whitmore-Hartwell was probably lying awake, wondering if her past had finally come to collect its due. Marcus pressed his palm against the cool glass and allowed himself to wonder if some bridges were worth rebuilding, even after they'd been burned to ash. Marcus pressed his palm against the cool glass and allowed himself to wonder if some bridges were worth rebuilding, even after they'd been burned to ash. The question would have to wait. His phone was buzzing with an urgency that cut through. His contemplation like a knife. Sir, we have a problem. Marcus's assistant's voice carried the kind of panic that came with million-dollar mistakes. The Meridian Group is threatening to pull their entire account. They're citing instability concerns following the acquisition announcement. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of crisis management settling on his shoulders. Meridian Group represented $37 million in annual revenue, the kind of loss that would make the acquisition look like an expensive mistake to his board of directors. "Schedule an emergency meeting for 7 a.m., Marcus said, his mind already shifting into damage control mode. "I want everyone from the Meridian team there, including," he paused, the irony not lost on him, "including Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell." This was her account, correct? "Yes, sir. She built the relationship from the ground up, then she fixed it." The next morning, Bella arrived at the Hartwell Media Building 45 minutes early, her nerves masked by a perfectly pressed charcoal suit and the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was fighting for her professional life. The conference room buzzed with anxious energy as junior executives shuffled papers and checked their phones obsessively. Marcus entered at exactly 7 a.m., Alina at his side like a general surveying a battlefield. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and his presence immediately commanded the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began without preamble, "we have 12 hours to save a $37 million client relationship. Meridian's board of directors is meeting at 7 p.m. to vote on whether to terminate their contract with us." He fixed his gaze on Bella. "Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell, you know these people better than anyone. What's their real concern?" Bella stood, her presentation materials already prepared despite the early hour. Meridian CEO Robert Chen, she paused, noticing Marcus's slight reaction to the shared surname, "is famously risk-averse. He's not concerned about our capabilities. He's worried about continuity. Meridian has worked with the same account team for 3 years. They're afraid we'll reassign their business to someone who doesn't understand their brand identity." "Then we reassure them," Alina interjected, "guarantee continuity, maybe even expand their team."
Nice.
"It's not that simple." Bella pulled up a slide showing Meridian's organizational chart. "Robert Chen doesn't make decisions in a vacuum. His daughter Lucy is their brand manager, and she's been skeptical of our digital integration strategy from the beginning. She's probably the one pushing for them to leave." Marcus studied the chart, his analytical mind processing the relationship dynamics. What would it take to convince her? A presentation that proves we can seamlessly blend traditional media expertise with cutting-edge digital innovation. Bella's voice grew stronger as she moved into her element. "Lucy Chen responds to data and concrete results. If we can show her that Technova's acquisition enhances rather than threatens their brand strategy, she'll advocate for staying." "How long do you need to prepare something like that?" 3 hours, maybe 4 if we want it to be bulletproof." Marcus checked his watch. "You have 6 hours to create, refine, and deliver the presentation of your career. But you won't be doing it alone." He turned to address the room. "Everyone else, you're dismissed. Ms. Whitmore-Hartwell and I will handle this personally." The room emptied quickly, leaving Marcus and Bella alone with the weight of their shared history and a ticking clock. For a moment, neither spoke, the memory of their last private conversation hanging between them like smoke. "We should get started," Bella said finally, her voice carefully professional. Marcus nodded, settling into the chair across from her. "Show me what you have in mind." 4 hours later, the conference room had been transformed into a war room. With presentation boards covering every surface and laptop screens glowing like digital campfires, Bella had shed her blazer hours ago. Her sleeves rolled up as she worked with the focused intensity Marcus remembered from their college study sessions. "The key is positioning Technova's analytics as an enhancement to their existing strategy, not a replacement," she explained, pointing to a complex flowchart she'd created. Meridian's brand identity is built on authenticity and personal connection. They're terrified that digital innovation will make them feel corporate and cold. Marcus leaned forward, studying her work with genuine admiration. "This integration model is brilliant. You're essentially showing them how to amplify their authentic voice rather than change it." "Exactly." Bella's eyes lit up with the passion he'd fallen in love with years ago. "Lucy Chen thinks digital marketing means generic algorithms and impersonal automation. But what if we show her how data can actually make their messaging more personal, more targeted, more authentic?" They worked in comfortable rhythm. Their professional chemistry undeniable despite the personal tension crackling beneath the surface. Marcus found himself remembering why he'd believed they could change the world together. Bella's strategic mind complemented his analytical approach perfectly, creating solutions neither could have developed alone. "We need real examples," Marcus said, pulling up Technova's proprietary analytics platform.
Alias.
"Show me Meridian's current engagement metrics." As Bella leaned over his shoulder to point out specific data points, Marcus caught that familiar scent of her perfume mixed with the coffee they'd been drinking for hours. For a moment, time collapsed, and he was 22 again, working late in the library while she explained marketing theory with the same passionate intensity. "Marcus." Bella's voice was soft, uncertain. "Are we really going to pretend this is just business?" He turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. Her green eyes held a vulnerability he hadn't seen since their college days, before the masks and defenses had been built. "Out. What else would it be?" he asked, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't know." She moved back slightly, but not far enough to break the connection. Maybe a chance to remember who we used to be before everything went wrong. Max felt the familiar war between his head and his heart, between the revenge he'd planned and the forgiveness he'd never quite been able to abandon. "You chose your path, Bella. You made your decision." "I made the decision I thought I had to make." Her voice carried years of regret. "That doesn't mean it was the right one." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Marcus stood abruptly, creating physical distance before his emotions could override his carefully constructed plans. "We should focus on the presentation," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Meridian is expecting results, not our personal drama." Bella nodded, slipping her professional mask back into place. "Of course. You're right." But as they returned to their work, something had shifted. The careful walls they'd built around their past had developed cracks, letting in just enough light to illuminate what they'd lost and what might still be possible. 2 hours later, the presentation was flawless. Bella had crafted a narrative that positioned Technova's acquisition as Meridian's secret weapon, complete with projected ROI increases and detailed implementation timelines. Marcus had provided the technical backbone, showing exactly how his company's algorithms could amplify Meridian's authentic brand voice. "It's good," Alina said, reviewing their work as they prepared for the client meeting. "Very good. If this doesn't convince them, nothing will." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on Bella as she made final adjustments to her slides. She'd tied her hair back during their work session, revealing the elegant line of her neck that had once been his favorite place to kiss her. The memory hit him unexpectedly, sharp and sweet and painful. "Marcus." Elena's voice cut through his reverie. "You need to be careful." "What do you mean? Mean the way you're looking at her?" Elena's expression was knowing and concerned. "Whatever this is, whatever's happening between you two, don't let it compromise the business." Marcus straightened, his tie forcing his attention back to the professional crisis at hand. "Nothing's happening. We're simply working together to save a client." "Right." Elena's tone suggested she wasn't buying his denial. "Just remember that some wounds never heal cleanly. Sometimes they get infected, as if summoned by their conversation." Bella approached with her presentation materials perfectly organized and her game face firmly in place. "Ready?" she asked, looking between Marcus and Elena. Marcus checked his watch. They had 30 minutes to get across town and save $37 million. 30 minutes to prove that their professional partnership could transcend their personal history. "Let's go save your account," he said. But as they walked toward the elevator, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to save much more than a client relationship. Whether that was a good thing or a dangerous mistake remained to be seen. The elevator doors closed, trapping them in a small space filled with possibility and the ghost of what they used to be. Outside, Manhattan rushed past their windows, indifferent to the fact that two people were about to discover whether their past could coexist with their future. The elevator doors closed, trapping them in a small space filled with possibility and the ghost of what they used to be. Outside, Manhattan rushed past their windows, indifferent to the fact that two people were about to discover whether their past could coexist with their future. The Meridian presentation had been a triumph. Lucy Chen had been visibly impressed by their seamless integration strategy, and her father had signed a 3-year extension on the spot. But the real victory, Marcus realized, as he watched Bella field congratulatory calls from colleagues, wasn't saving the account. It was witnessing her brilliance in action once again. That was incredible, he said, as they stood outside the Meridian building, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across Fifth Avenue. You were incredible. Bella looked up from her phone, surprise flickering across her features at the genuine admiration in his voice. We were incredible. That presentation wouldn't have worked without your analytics integration. The word we hung between them like a revelation. For 6 hours, they'd been partners again. Their professional chemistry, as undeniable as their personal history, was complicated. Marcus felt something dangerous stirring in his chest, hope, maybe, or the treacherous possibility of forgiveness. Have dinner with me, he said impulsively. Marcus. To celebrate saving the account, nothing more. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but it was safer than admitting he simply wasn't ready for their collaboration to end. Bella hesitated, her wedding ring catching the light as she twisted it nervously. I should get home. Alexander will be expecting one drink. One conversation between two colleagues who just pulled off the impossible. Marcus's voice carried the kind of quiet intensity that had once convinced her to skip classes and chase dreams with him. What's the harm in that? 2 hours later, the rooftop bar at the St. Regis overlooked the glittering sprawl of Manhattan. Its sophisticated atmosphere a world away from the dive bars where they'd once dissected literature and life. Bella sat across from Marcus, nursing a glass of champagne while he worked on his second scotch. The professional excuse for their meeting had evaporated sometime during the first drink, leaving them in the dangerous territory of actual conversation. Do you remember the night we stayed up until dawn working on Professor Sullivan's impossible marketing case study? Bella asked, her voice soft with nostalgia. Marcus smiled despite himself. You insisted we could revolutionize how nonprofits approach donor engagement. I thought you were crazy, and you were right. The presentation was a disaster, but the ideas were brilliant. You were just ahead of your time. Marcus studied her face in the golden light of the setting sun. You were always ahead of your time. The compliment landed between them like a small confession. Bella looked away, focusing on the city sprawling below them. Sometimes being ahead doesn't matter if you don't have the courage to keep moving forward. Is that what happened? You lost your courage? I lost my way. She met his eyes again, and Marcus saw the weight of 5 years of regret. Made it very clear what was expected of me. The family was drowning in debt, and Alexander offered stability, security, a future that didn't depend on dreams and maybes. And what about love? Question slipped out before Marcus could stop. Love, Bella laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love was a luxury I couldn't afford. At least that's what I told myself. Marcus felt his carefully constructed anger beginning to crack. And now? Can you afford it now? Before Bella could answer, her phone buzzed insistently. Alexander's name flashed on the screen, and Marcus watched her face transform as reality intruded on their bubble of nostalgia. I should take this, she said apologetically, answering the call. Hello, Alexander. Even from across the table, Marcus could hear the sharp edge in Alexander's voice. Where the hell are you? I've been calling for hours. I'm having a business dinner. The Meridian account. I don't care about your accounts. Need you home now. The investors are coming over, and I need you to play the perfect wife. Marcus watched Bella's expression shudder. The vibrant woman he'd been talking with disappearing behind a mask of dutiful compliance. Of course, I'll be right there. She ended the call and stood, gathering her purse with mechanical efficiency. I'm sorry, Marcus. I have to go. You don't have to do anything. The words came out harder than he'd intended. Not his. Employee Bella. You're his wife. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him with eyes that held years of accumulated compromise. Sometimes I wonder. Marcus stood as well, his protective instincts warring with his professional detachment. Stay. Let him handle his own business dinner for once. I can't. But her voice lacked conviction, and Marcus pressed his advantage. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Bella stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the war playing out behind her green eyes. The dutiful wife fighting against the woman who'd once dreamed of changing the world. She said finally, "Some of us can't afford to burn bridges. Some of us have to live with the choices we've made." She walked away without looking back, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the bitter taste of unfinished business. Meanwhile, at the Whitmore-Hartwell penthouse, Alexander was already 3 drinks deep when Bella arrived home, his usual charm replaced by the surly aggression that alcohol brought out in him. The investors, 2 middle-aged men in expensive suits, looked uncomfortable as Alexander regaled them with increasingly incoherent stories about his family's media legacy. "Ah, there she is," Alexander announced as Bella entered. "Gentlemen, my beautiful wife, Isabella. The secret weapon. Behind all my success?" Bella smiled graciously, slipping into the role she'd perfected over 5 years of marriage. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Business ran longer than expected." "What business could possibly be more important than your husband's future?" Alexander's tone was jovial for the investor's benefit, but Bella caught the warning underneath. "The Meridian account. We secured a 3-year extension today, Meridian." And one of the investors perked up. "Impressive. That's a substantial client, yes. Well, Isabella has always been good with details," Alexander said dismissively. "Speaking of which, darling, perhaps you could refresh our drinks while I explain the entertainment division expansion?" Bella moved to the bar, her hands steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. As she poured scotch and made small talk, her mind kept drifting to the rooftop terrace. To Marcus's question about love and courage, to the woman she'd glimpsed in the mirror during their presentation, confident, brilliant, alive. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "You were magnificent today. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Bella deleted the message immediately, but the words lingered in her mind like a dangerous promise. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office to find Elena waiting in his chair, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you too," Marcus said, settling behind his desk. "What's the crisis this time?" "You are," Elena stood, pacing to the window overlooking the city. "David called me last night. He's worried about you." Marcus frowned. "What did my brother say? That you've been asking questions about Bella's marriage? About Alexander's business dealings, about things that have nothing to do with running this company?" Elena turned to face him. "Marcus, what exactly are you planning?" "I'm not planning anything. I'm simply staying informed about key personnel." "Bullshit." Elena's voice cut through his deflection like a blade. "I've known you for 5 years. You don't do anything without a strategy. So what's the endgame here?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering his options. Elena deserved honesty, but the truth was complicated. "I offered her a chance to lead the Hartwell legacy campaign." "You what?" Elena's eyes widened. "Marcus, that's a $100 million project. The board specifically said, to put our best people on our highest profile campaigns. Bella is our best people." Marcus's voice carried a conviction that surprised even him. "After yesterday's presentation, there's no question about her capabilities." "This isn't about her capabilities, and we both know it." Lena sat down across from him, her expression serious. "You're playing with fire, and not just your own, hers too. Does she know what you're offering her?" "I'm meeting with her this afternoon to discuss it." Elena stared at him for a long moment. "Just promise me something. Whatever you're feeling, whatever this is becoming, don't let it destroy everything we've built. Technova is bigger than your personal history." Marcus nodded, but his attention was already drifting to the afternoon meeting. It's the moment when he would offer Bella the kind of professional opportunity that could change everything or destroy them both. Outside his window, Manhattan hummed with its relentless energy. 8 million people pursuing their own versions of success and happiness. Somewhere among them, Isabella Whitmore-Hartwell was probably sitting in her own office, unaware that her past was about to collide with her future in ways she couldn't imagine. Marcus checked his watch for hours until their meeting. For hours to decide whether he was offering redemption or revenge, whether he was saving her career or setting a trap that would destroy them both. The line between justice and cruelty had never felt thinner. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the Hartwell legacy campaign proposal on his desk. $100 million. 18 months? And the kind of high-profile project that could launch a career into the stratosphere? Or destroy it completely. In 3 hours, he would offer it to Bella, and he still wasn't sure whether he was extending a lifeline or setting a trap. His phone buzzed with an urgent news alert. Hartwell Industries under federal investigation for securities fraud. Marcus's blood ran cold as he read the details. Alexander's entertainment division had been funneling money through shell companies, inflating revenue figures to attract investors. The FBI had raided his offices that morning. Alina burst through his door without knocking, her tablet clutched. In her white-knuckled grip. "Have you seen the news?" "Just now." Marcus stood, his mind racing through the implications. "How bad is it?" "Bad. The SEC is freezing assets, investors are fleeing, and every major news outlet is running the story." Elena's voice was grim. "Alexander Hartwell is about to become the poster child for corporate fraud." Marcus felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and concern. Alexander's downfall had been inevitable. The man's arrogance and incompetence had made it only a matter of time. But Bella would be caught in the crossfire, her reputation tainted by association. "What about Bella?" he asked. "That's what I'm worried about." Helena pulled up another article on her tablet. "Look at this headline. Hartwell Media heiress implicated in husband's fraud scheme. They're already painting her as complicit." Marcus read over Elena's shoulder, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. The article was full of speculation and innuendo, suggesting that Bella had used her position at Hartwell Media to facilitate her husband's schemes. It was character assassination disguised as journalism. "She had nothing to do with this," Marcus said, his voice hard with conviction. "You and I know that, but the media doesn't care about facts when they have a compelling narrative." Alina looked at him seriously. "Marcus, this changes everything. If we're seen as harboring someone connected to a federal investigation, she's not connected to anything except bad judgment in choosing a husband." Marcus moved to his window, watching the city buzz with its usual indifference to individual tragedies. "We protect her. At what cost? Our reputation? Our stock price? The confidence of our investors?" Lena's voice rose slightly. "Marcus, I understand you have feelings for her, but Technova employs 8,000 people. We have responsibilities beyond your personal history." Before Marcus could respond, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, there's a situation downstairs. Mrs. Whitmore-Hartwell is in the lobby, and there are reporters outside trying to get in." Marcus exchanged a look with Alina, then grabbed his jacket. "Tell security to bring her up through the service elevator. Get legal on the phone, we're going to need them." 20 minutes later, Bella sat in Marcus's office, her usual composure completely shattered. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from crying, and her hands shook as she clutched a cup of coffee. She looked like a woman whose world had just collapsed. "I didn't know," she said for the third time, her voice barely above a whisper. "I swear to you, Marcus, I had no idea what he was doing." "I believe you." Marcus sat across from her, fighting the urge to reach out and comfort her. "But believing you and proving it are two different things. The FBI came to our apartment this morning. They searched everything: my office, my computer, my personal files." Bella's voice broke slightly. "They acted like I was part of some criminal conspiracy." Alina cleared her throat from her position by the door. "Bella, I need to ask you some difficult questions, for your protection as much as ours." Bella nodded, straightening slightly in her chair. "Did you ever sign any documents for Alexander's entertainment ventures? Transfer any money? Make any calls on his behalf to potential investors?" "No, never." Bella's answer was immediate and firm. "Alexander kept his business completely separate from mine. Said it was to protect me from the boring details of his work." Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. Alexander hadn't been protecting Bella, he'd been protecting himself, ensuring she couldn't testify against him if his schemes unraveled. "What about your family?" Alina continued. "Your mother specifically. The media is reporting that she received substantial loans from Alexander's companies." Bella's face went pale. "What loans?" Alina exchanged a glance with Marcus before pulling up another article on her tablet. "According to this, Margaret Whitmore received $3 million in consulting fees from Alexander's shell companies over the past 2 years. The color drained completely from Bella's face as the implications hit her. Oh God, she knew. My mother knew what he was doing, and Bella stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. She pushed me to marry him, even when I told her about how I felt. She said Alexander was the practical choice. She said love was a luxury our family couldn't afford. Bella, Marcus said gently, I need you to think carefully. Did your mother ever pressure you to share information about your work? Client lists, financial data, anything that Alexander could have used? Bella's voice caught. She asked about the Meridian account last year. Wanted to know their revenue figures, their expansion plans. I thought she was just making conversation, but she looked up at Marcus with horrified understanding. She was feeding him information. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic far below. Marcus felt his anger crystallizing, not at Bella, but at the people who had manipulated her, used her, and were now leaving her to face the consequences alone. Marcus, Alina said carefully, we need to make a decision. Do we stand by her publicly, or do we distance ourselves until this investigation concludes? It was the question Marcus had been dreading. The smart business decision would be to cut ties immediately, to protect Technova from any association with the scandal. But looking at Bella broken, betrayed, abandoned by everyone who was supposed to protect her, he knew there was only one choice he could live with. We stand by her, he said firmly. She's innocent, and I won't let her be destroyed by other people's crimes. Elena nodded slowly, though Marcus could see the concern in her eyes. Then we go public. Full support, complete confidence in her integrity. But Marcus, if this backfires, it won't. Marcus turned to Bella, who was staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. But you need to understand what. This means the media attention will be intense. They'll dig into every aspect of your life, your marriage, your past, including us. Bella's voice was barely audible. Our relationship in college, our professional collaboration now, they'll twist it into whatever narrative sells papers. Marcus leaned forward, his voice serious. Are you prepared for that? Bella was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see her processing the full scope of what lay ahead. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been all. 5 years ago, I chose security over authenticity, chose what was expected over what I wanted. I chose fear over courage. She met Marcus's eyes directly. I won't make that mistake again. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the anger he'd carried for so long. This wasn't the same woman who had walked away from him at graduation. This was someone who had been tested by fire and was finally ready to fight for what mattered. Then we do this together, he said. All the way. Elena's phone buzzed urgently. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. We have a problem. Alexander just held a press conference. He's blaming everything on Bella, claiming she was the mastermind behind the fraud scheme. Marcus felt his protective instincts surge to the surface. Get legal on the phone, we're going to war. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Manhattan, as if the city itself was preparing for the battle that was about to unfold. In one corner sat Alexander Hartwell III, fighting for his freedom with lies and betrayal. Chen and Isabella Whitmore, about to discover whether truth and justice were enough to survive a scandal that threatened to destroy them both. The foundation of Bella's carefully constructed life had cracked beyond repair. Now the question was whether she could build something stronger from the ruins. As Marcus's legal team scrambled to prepare a response to Alexander's accusations, Bella found herself staring at her reflection in the conference room window, wondering how she'd become a stranger to herself. We need to get ahead of this, Elena said, pacing the length of the room with her phone pressed to her ear. Every minute we wait is another minute for his narrative to take hold. Marcus studied the transcript of Alexander's press conference, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. Alexander had painted himself as the victim of a manipulative wife, who'd used her family connections and media expertise to orchestrate an elaborate fraud scheme. It was masterfully done, just enough truth mixed with lies to make the whole thing believable. He's not just trying to save himself, Marcus said quietly. "He's trying to destroy you completely." Bella looked up from her own copy of the transcript, her face pale but determined. "Then we destroy him first." The words surprised everyone in the room, including Bella herself. For 5 years, she'd been the dutiful wife, absorbing Alexander's failures and protecting his reputation at the cost of her own identity. But something had shifted in the past 24 hours. A fundamental change that went deeper than professional crisis or public scandal. "What do you mean?" Elena asked. I mean, I'm done being a victim." Bella stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city where her life was being dissected by strangers. "Alexander thinks he knows all my secrets, but he doesn't know the most important one." Marcus felt a chill of anticipation. "What secret?" "I've been keeping records. Everything. Every conversation with my mother about his business dealings. Every time he asked me to use my professional contacts for his benefit. Every document he thought I didn't understand." Bella turned to face them, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before: the cold, calculated fury of a brilliant woman who'd finally decided to fight back. "I have 5 years of evidence that proves exactly what kind of man Alexander Hartwell really is." Elena stopped pacing. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that shows he's been manipulating me since before we were married. Email correspondence with my mother about my family's financial difficulties. Recorded conversations where he discusses using my position at Hartwell Media to gain inside information for his investments. Bank records showing the payments he made to ensure I'd choose him over," she glanced at Marcus, "over other options." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus felt his world tilt slightly as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began falling into place. "Recorded conversations?" he asked carefully. "Alexander has a tendency to drink and brag. I started recording our private conversations after the first year of marriage, when I realized how different he was behind closed doors." Bella's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the cost of those recordings in her eyes. "I told myself. It was insurance, in case he ever tried to blame me for his failures. I never thought I'd actually need to use them." Elena was already reaching for her phone. "We need to get our tech team involved immediately. You have evidence that he coerced you into marriage through financial manipulation." "There's more," Bella interrupted. "And she hit some in it with a wetter at all. I Panama with a head with a friend was including evidence that he knew about the securities fraud from the beginning and deliberately kept me ignorant to use me as a scapegoat if he got caught." Marcus stood slowly, his mind reeling. "Bella, why didn't you tell me this yesterday? When you were sitting here terrified and broken?" "Because yesterday I was still thinking like a victim. I was still operating from the mindset that I had to accept whatever happened to me, that I had no power to fight back." She met his eyes. "Directly, but you stood by me when you had every reason not to. You offered me protection when I had nothing to offer in return. That reminded me who I used to be before Alexander and my mother convinced me I was powerless." The conference room door opened and Marcus's brother David entered, his usually calm demeanor replaced by urgent concern. "Marcus, I just saw the news, are you?" He stopped when he saw Bella, his expression softening. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm sorry you're going through this." "David," Marcus said, "what are you doing here?" "Professor Sullivan called me. He said there was something he needed to tell you about what happened in college. Something about Alexander Hartwell that he should have spoken up about years ago." Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle shifting into place. "What did he say?" David looked uncomfortable. Said Alexander approached him after your graduation. He's asking questions about your relationship with Bella. Specifically, he wanted to know if there was any way to legally prevent you from contacting her after graduation. The room went deadly quiet. Bella's face had gone completely white. There's more, David continued reluctantly. Professor Sullivan said he refused to help, but he always suspected that Alexander had found other ways to ensure you and Bella couldn't reconnect. He never said anything because he had no proof, but now, with everything that's happening, he threatened Marcus, Bella whispered, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. God, he actually threatened you. Marcus felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded him. What are you talking about? The summer after graduation, Alexander told me he'd heard you were planning to contact me. He said it would be unfortunate if anything happened to interfere with your scholarship applications for graduate school. I thought he was just being possessive, but Bella's voice trailed off as she realized the full scope of what had been done to them. He sabotaged us, Marcus said quietly. From the very beginning, he sabotaged us. Alina had been quietly taking notes throughout the conversation, but now she looked up with the expression of a general planning a battle. This changes everything. If we can prove that Alexander used coercion, financial manipulation, and threats to break up your relationship and force Bella into marriage, then his current accusations become part of a pattern of abuse and manipulation. But we'll need more than just testimony, David pointed out. We'll need documentation, evidence that can stand up in court. Bella was already reaching for her phone. I know where Alexander keeps his personal files. If there's documentation of the threats against Marcus, of the payments to my mother, of any of it, he'll be there. Bella, Marcus said carefully, if you're thinking of going back to that apartment, I'm thinking of getting the evidence we need to destroy him before he destroys us. Her voice carried a determination that reminded Marcus of the woman. He'd fallen in love with, brilliant, fearless, and utterly committed to fighting for what was right. Alexander underestimated me for 5 years. He thought I was weak, that I'd never fight back. He was wrong. Lena stood up, her expression businesslike. Then we do this properly. Full legal protection, FBI cooperation, everything by the book. If Alexander Hartwell wants a war, we'll give him one. Marcus watched Bella's transformation with a mixture of admiration and something deeper. The recognition that the woman he'd never quite been able to forget was finally fighting her way back to herself. The truth about their past was devastating, but it was also liberating. All the anger he'd carried, all the questions about why she'd chosen Alexander over him, none of it had been real. They'd been victims of a manipulation so comprehensive it had stolen 5 years of their lives. When do we start? Marcus asked. Bella smiled for the first time since entering his office that morning, and it was like watching the sun break. Through storm clouds, we already have. Outside Manhattan hummed with its relentless energy, unaware that in a conference room 42 floors above the street, 2 people were about to reclaim a future that had been stolen from them. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the possibility that some love stories were strong enough to survive even the most elaborate deceptions. The real battle was just beginning. Within 6 hours of Bella's revelation, Marcus's legal team had coordinated with the FBI to arrange a controlled evidence retrieval from the Whitmore-Hartwell penthouse. Bella would return home wearing a wire, with federal agents positioned in the building and Marcus's security team monitoring from a safe house 3 blocks away. Remember, Agent Sarah Collins briefed Bella as technicians fitted the nearly invisible recording device. Your only job is to get him talking. Don't push too hard. Don't seem suspicious. We need him to incriminate himself naturally. Bella nodded, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. The woman who had arrived at Marcus's office that morning broken. Terrified dependent had been replaced by someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. What if he suspects something? Marcus asked, unable to hide his concern. He won't, Bella said with quiet confidence. Alexander's greatest weakness has always been his arrogance. He believes he's the smartest person in every room, that he's always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It won't occur to him that I might finally be fighting back. Alina reviewed the technical setup one final time. The moment you feel unsafe, use the code phrase. I need to call my mother, and we'll have agents in the apartment within 90 seconds. Marcus wanted to object, wanted to find some other way that didn't require Bella to face Alexander alone. But they all knew this was their best chance, perhaps their only chance to get the evidence they needed before Alexander's lies became accepted truth. "I'm ready," Bella said, and Marcus heard echoes of the fearless woman he'd fallen in love with in college. The Whitmore-Hartwell penthouse, 8:47 p.m. Alexander was waiting when Bella entered. His usual polished appearance disheveled by stress and alcohol. Empty Scotch bottles littered the marble countertop, and his eyes held the manic gleam of a desperate man backed into a corner. "There's my loving wife," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Back from your little meeting with your new boyfriend. He's my boss, Alexander, nothing more." Bella kept her voice level, professional. "We were discussing damage control strategies." "Damage control?" Alexander laughed bitterly. "The damage is done, Isabella. Your boyfriend's little company just lost 30% of its stock value, thanks to their association with us." "With you." Bella felt a flash of guilt, but pushed it aside. Marcus had known the risks when he chose to stand by her. "The FBI cleared me of any wrongdoing. The investigation will prove the investigation. Will prove whatever I tell them it proves." Alexander moved closer, and Bella could smell the alcohol on his breath. "See, my dear wife, I've been very careful about how I've positioned you in all of this. Every financial document, every investment decision, every communication with clients, it all points back to you. That's impossible." "I never signed anything knowingly," Alexander corrected with a cruel smile. "But power of attorney is a wonderful thing. All those tax documents you signed without reading? Those investment forms you thought were for our retirement portfolio? Each one gave me the legal authority to act on your behalf." Bella's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You forged my signature?" "I didn't need to forge anything. I simply guided your hand when you were distracted. A glass of wine with dinner, some romantic music, a few documents mixed in with legitimate paperwork." Alexander's pride in his deception was sickening. "You trusted me completely. It made everything so much easier, including the manipulation of my family's finances." Bella kept her voice steady, but her heart was racing. Alexander's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Your mother was facing bankruptcy. The Whitmore family fortune, what was left of it, was about to disappear completely. I offered her a solution, convince her daughter to marry well, and I'd ensure the family's financial security. You bought my mother." The words tasted like ash in Bella's mouth. "I bought your future, your security, your place in society." Alexander poured himself another drink, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. "You should be grateful. Without me, you'd have ended up like your scholarship boyfriend, brilliant but powerless, dreaming of a success you'd never achieve." "What did you do to Marcus?" The question slipped out before Bella could stop it. Alexander's smile turned predatory. "Marcus Chen was a threat to my plans from the beginning, so I eliminated the threat." "How?" "Simple. I made it clear that any attempt to contact you after graduation would result in complications for his future. Graduate school rejections, employment difficulties, problems that would follow him wherever he went." Alexander's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone describing the weather. "Of course, I also ensured you were too busy adjusting to married life to think about former romantic entanglements." Bella remembered those first months of marriage, the constant social obligations, the pressure to be the perfect wife, the way Alexander had isolated her from all her college friends. "You kept me away from everyone who might have helped me. I kept you focused on what mattered: our marriage, our social position, our future together." Alexander's voice rose slightly, the alcohol making him more volatile. "Everything I did was for us, Isabella. Every lie, every manipulation, every sacrifice, it was all to build the life you deserved." "The life you wanted," Bella corrected. "Not the life I chose. You were 22 years old. You didn't know what you wanted." Alexander slammed his glass down, scotch splashing across the marble. "You would have thrown away everything, your family's legacy, your social position. Your financial security for what? Love? Romance? Some fairy tale about changing the world with a boy who couldn't even afford a proper suit? That boy just bought your family's company? The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His face darkened with rage, and for a moment Bella thought he might actually strike her. Marcus Chen got lucky, Alexander snarled. He built his little tech company on algorithms and venture capital, but he has no idea how real power works. No understanding of legacy, of tradition, of the responsibilities that come with actual wealth. Is that why you're trying to destroy him now? Because he succeeded despite everything you did to stop him? I'm trying to protect what's mine. Alexander's control finally snapped completely. You're my wife. My family's media empire was my birthright. Everything that bastard has achieved belongs to me. The raw hatred in his voice chilled Bella to the bone. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about a man who had never been denied anything in his life, finally facing consequences for his actions. None of it belongs to you, Bella said quietly. The company belongs to Marcus now, and I was never yours to begin with. Alexander's eyes widened as the full implication of her words hit him. What are you saying? I'm saying our marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm testifying against you in the federal investigation. Bella stood, her decision crystallizing with each word. I'm done being your victim, Alexander. I'm done being anyone's victim. You can't leave me. Alexander's voice cracked with desperation. Without me, you're nothing. And without my family's name, without my connections, you'll lose everything. I already lost everything that mattered 5 years ago. Now I'm getting it back. Alexander lunged toward her, but Bella was already moving toward the door. I need to call my mother, she said clearly, activating the emergency signal. You're not going anywhere. Alexander grabbed her arm, his grip painful enough to bruise. If you think you can humiliate me, destroy my reputation. Take my company. The front door exploded open as federal agents flooded the apartment, weapons drawn. Alexander released Bella immediately, stumbling backward as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his alcohol-fueled rage. Alexander Hartwell, 3. You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes, Agent Collins announced as handcuffs clicked into place. As they led Alexander away, he turned back to Bella with pure venom in his eyes. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. Bella watched her husband, soon-to-be-husband, disappear into the elevator, and felt 5 years of fear and subjugation lift from her shoulders like a physical weight. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled in the darkness. Full of possibilities, she was finally free to explore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Are you okay? Bella smiled as she typed her response. I'm perfect. We got everything. Outside, the city hummed with its relentless energy, unaware that in a penthouse 40 floors above the street, a woman had just reclaimed her life from the man who had stolen it. The breaking point had arrived, and with it, the first real taste of freedom Bella had experienced in 5 years. The war was far from over, but this battle belonged to them. By morning, Alexander's arrest had become front-page news across every major publication, with his recorded confession playing on repeat across cable networks. The man who had painted himself as a victim just 24 hours earlier was now exposed as a manipulative predator who had orchestrated one of the most elaborate fraud schemes in recent memory. Marcus stood in his office at dawn watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and amber. When Alina entered with her usual armload of crisis management materials, the overnight polling is in, she announced, settling into the chair across from his desk. 68% of respondents now view Bella as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. The recordings changed everything. In Technova's stock, price up 12% since the market opened. Turns out standing by an innocent woman against a corrupt husband plays well with investors. Elena's expression softened slightly. You did the right thing, Marcus. Both morally and financially. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the scene playing out on the street below. News vans surrounded the building, reporters camping out for any glimpse of the woman who had brought down Alexander Hartwell, 3, somewhere in that media circus. Bella was navigating the aftermath of her decision to fight back. Any word from her this morning? He asked. Sarah Kim called an hour ago. Bella's at her apartment. fielding calls from her legal team and trying to process everything that happened. Alina paused, studying Marcus's expression. She asked if you were okay. The simple concern in that question hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. After 5 years of believing Bella had chosen money over love, of building his success on the foundation of that betrayal, learning that none of it had been real was disorienting. His anger, his driving force for so long had evaporated, leaving him uncertain about what came next. Marcus, Alina said gently, "What are you going to do now?" Before he could answer, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, Margaret Whitmore is here to see you. She says it's urgent." Marcus and Alina exchanged glances. Bella's mother showing up unannounced couldn't be good news. "Send her in," Marcus said. Margaret Whitmore entered his office like a woman preparing for battle. At 58, she retained the elegant bearing that had once made her the queen of Manhattan society. But stress and desperation had carved new lines around her eyes. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but it couldn't hide the fact that her world was crumbling. "Mr. Chen," she said with forced civility, "I believe we need to discuss my daughter's future." "I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't we?" "No." Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "You've destroyed my son-in-law, humiliated my family, and turned my daughter against me. Surely you feel some responsibility for the consequences of your actions." Alina stood to leave, but Marcus gestured for her to stay. Whatever Margaret had come to say, he wanted a witness. "The only actions I'm responsible for are standing by an innocent woman and helping expose the truth," Marcus replied coolly. "If that's destroyed your family's reputation, perhaps you should examine what that reputation was built on." Eyes flashed with anger. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? It's rescuing the poor princess from her tower. I think I'm a man who finally learned what really happened 5 years ago." "What really happened," Margaret said with bitter emphasis, "is that I saved my daughter from making the biggest mistake of her life. You were brilliant, I'll give you that. But brilliance without connections is worthless. Without wealth, without social position, you would have dragged Isabella down to your level." Marcus felt Alina tense beside him, but he kept his voice. "Level, and instead, you sold her to the highest bidder. I ensured her future. Alexander offered stability, security, a place in society that matched her breeding and education." Margaret's voice rose with each word. "What could you have given her? Love? Romance? Pretty words that don't pay for the kind of life she deserved. I could have given her a choice." The simple statement hung in the air like an accusation. Margaret stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw something in her expression shift, not quite regret, but perhaps the first glimmer of understanding about what she had cost her daughter. "Choices are luxuries," Margaret said finally, her voice quieter now. "Luxuries that families like mine couldn't afford. The Whitmore fortune was built over 3 generations, and I watched it disappear in less than 10 years. Isabella's marriage to Alexander was the only way to save what was left of our legacy." "Your legacy," Marcus corrected. "Not hers. You never asked what she wanted. She was 22 years old. She wanted fairy tales and forever love, things that exist in novels, but not in the real world." Margaret moved to the window, staring out at the city that had once welcomed her as royalty. "I did what I thought was best for her. You did what was best for yourself." Margaret turned back to face him, and for the first time since entering his office, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "Perhaps, but can you honestly tell me you would have been able to give her the life she has now? The penthouse, the designer clothes, the social connections, the professional opportunities?" Marcus considered the question seriously. 5 years ago, he'd been a broke graduate student with big dreams and no guarantees. Even with his current success, he couldn't say with certainty that their path would have led to happiness. "I don't." "No," he admitted. "But it would have been her choice to make, and now? What happens now that you've destroyed everything I built to protect her?" It was Alina who answered. Now she gets to make her own choices. Dashi. For the first time in 5 years, she's free to choose her own path. Margaret laughed bitterly. "Freedom. Do you have any idea what freedom costs a woman in her position?" At the guy. Media attention, the legal fees, the social ostracism. Isabella may have escaped Alexander, but she's walking into a different kind of prison. Marcus felt a chill of concern. In his focus on exposing the truth and bringing Alexander to justice, he hadn't fully considered the long-term consequences for Bella. The media coverage would follow her for years. Potential employers would always wonder about her role in the scandal. And her social circle built around Alexander's connections would likely abandon her, which is why Margaret continued, reading his expression. I'm proposing a solution, a way for all of us to move forward with our dignity intact. What kind of solution? Alina asked suspiciously. Isabella divorces Alexander quietly, without the media circus of a public trial. I provide testimony that clears her of any wrongdoing, in exchange for a guarantee that the family name won't be dragged through any more mud. And you, Mr. Chen, use your considerable influence to ensure she lands somewhere respectable when this is all over. In exchange for what? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. In exchange for staying away from her, permanently. Margaret's voice carried the steel that had once cowed Manhattan society. You've had your revenge, Mr. Chen. You've proven that you can destroy the man who stole her from you. But Isabella doesn't need another powerful man controlling her life, even if he does it out of love instead of greed. The accusation hit harder than Marcus had expected. Is that what he was doing? Using his power and influence to shape Bella's choices, just as Alexander and her mother had done. That's not how he began, isn't it? Margaret interrupted. You bought Alexander's company to get close to her. You've positioned yourself as her protector and savior. You're offering her professional opportunities that conveniently require her to work closely with you. How is that different from what Alexander did? Alina stood abruptly. That's enough. You don't get to come into our office and make demands after what you've done. Bella is free to make her own choices about her career and her personal life. Free? Margaret laughed. She's more dependent on Marcus Chen now than she ever was on Alexander Hartwell. At least Alexander married her. Mr. Chen is content too. Keep her as a grateful employee forever in his debt for saving her from a situation he helped create. Marcus felt the truth in Margaret's words like a physical blow. Had he rescued Bella, or had he simply replaced Alexander as the powerful man shaping her destiny? Get out, Alina said coldly. Before I call security, Margaret gathered her purse with the dignity of a queen in exile. Think about what I've said, Mr. Chen. If you truly care about my daughter's welfare, you'll consider what's best for her rather than what satisfies your own needs. She left without another word, leaving Marcus and Elena alone with the weight of her accusations. She's wrong, Alina said immediately. You're nothing like Alexander. But Marcus wasn't sure she was right. As he stared out at the city where Bella was somewhere trying to rebuild her life, he wondered if Margaret Whitmore had just shown him an uncomfortable truth about his own motivations. The consequences of their battle against Alexander were only beginning to unfold. The consequences of their battle against Alexander were only beginning to unfold. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled. Alexander was serving a 12-year sentence in federal prison. Margaret Whitmore had retreated to her family's estate in the Hamptons. And Bella had done something that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd walked away. Not from Marcus, not from her career, but from the entire world that had tried to define her worth. Using the settlement from her divorce and her own considerable talents, Bella had launched Whitmore Consulting, boutique firms specializing in crisis management and corporate restructuring. Her first clients were companies that needed someone who understood both traditional business practices and cutting-edge digital strategies, exactly the expertise she'd developed during her years at Hartwell Media. Marcus learned about her decision from a newspaper article. Sitting in his office on a gray October morning, the photo showed Bella in a crisp white suit, standing in front of her new office building, looking confident and self-possessed in a way that took his breath away. She didn't tell you? Alina asked, reading over his shoulder. We haven't spoken since the trial ended. Marcus set down the paper, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't name. I thought. After everything that happened, she needed space to figure out who she was without someone else making decisions for her. And you? Have you discovered what you truly want? Elena's voice cut through his contemplation like a gentle blade. Marcus continued studying the photograph, committing to memory the radiant authenticity of Bella's smile, so vastly different from the carefully constructed mask she had worn throughout her suffocating marriage. I want her to find genuine happiness, whatever form that takes, wherever that path leads her. Even if that journey doesn't include you? The question crystallized between them like morning frost. Marcus had spent countless restless months grappling with Margaret Whitmore's razor-sharp accusations, performing psychological surgery on his own motivations, desperately trying to untangle his protective instincts from his possessive desires. Even then, he said with quiet finality, surprised by how much he meant it. Elena observed him with the penetrating gaze of someone, reading between carefully guarded lines. You realize there's a third possibility you haven't considered.
Which
would be, you could attempt being her equal rather than her rescuer, her collaborator instead of her guardian. Elena's smile carried both wisdom and gentle challenge. Perhaps begin by simply being her friend. Marcus returned his attention to the newspaper image, this woman who had reclaimed her existence on her own uncompromising terms. Perhaps the moment had arrived to stop calculating what he could offer or extract from her, and start envisioning what they might construct together, if she had any desire to build anything at all. Beyond the windows, autumn was transforming Manhattan into a living painting of amber and scarlet, the city reinventing itself with the same courage they had both discovered. Some conclusions Marcus understood with sudden clarity, or merely fresh beginnings wearing sophisticated disguises. 12 months later, the invitation materialized on his mahogany desk like a messenger from a forgotten world. Pristine cream paper adorned with flowing calligraphy. Eastwood University cordially invites you to the class of 2025 year reunion. Marcus studied the elegant script as if it contained encrypted secrets, then reached for his phone with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Are you planning to attend? He asked when Elena's familiar voice filled the silence. Attend what? Precisely. The reunion. A thoughtful pause stretched across the connection. Are you asking because you genuinely wish to go, or because you're harboring hope that she'll be there? Marcus's silence provided an eloquent answer. Go, Elena said. Finally, her tone carrying both encouragement and caution. But go for the right reasons. Eastwood University. October 15th, the campus existed in a state of beautiful suspension, ever-wrapped brick buildings, standing like ancient guardians of memory. Towering oak trees whose gnarled branches had sheltered countless dreams and witnessed innumerable heartbreaks, students rushing between lecture halls with the same desperate energy that had once consumed him. Marcus wandered toward the Alumni Center with deliberate slowness, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, questioning the mysterious force that had compelled him to make this pilgrimage. He found his answer in the courtyard adjacent to Sullivan Hall. Bella stood beneath the identical oak tree where they had shared their first tentative, world-changing kiss, engaged in spirited conversation with Professor Sullivan. She wore a simple cobalt dress that transformed her eyes into twin oceans, and when she laughed at something the elderly academic said, Marcus felt the earth shift beneath his feet. She had noticed his approach and turned, her expression radiating warmth while maintaining careful emotional boundaries. Marcus, I wondered if you'd find the courage to come, Bella, he offered Professor Sullivan, a respectful acknowledgement. I'll leave you two to navigate these particular waters, Sullivan said with barely concealed delight. Dissolving into the crowd of returning alumni like smoke on the wind, they stood suspended in pregnant silence. The accumulated weight of unspoken truths pressing down between them like atmospheric pressure before a storm. I've been following your company's remarkable trajectory, Marcus ventured finally. Congratulations. The Technology Integration Initiative for Small Businesses is genuinely revolutionary. Thank you. And my congratulations on the European expansion. Technova's growth has been nothing short of extraordinary. More silence expanded between them. They were conversing like diplomatic strangers, and Marcus found himself despising every politely measured word. Bella, I need to. Marcus, I wanted To express my profound gratitude, she interrupted, stepping close enough that he could see the constellation of golden flecks scattered through her emerald eyes. For everything you did, for standing beside me when you had every justifiable reason to abandon me entirely. I never properly thanked you. You owe me nothing. Yes, I do. She moved closer still, and he inhaled that achingly familiar fragrance that had haunted his dreams for half a decade. You saved my life, not merely from Alexander's labyrinth of deception, but from the psychological prison I had constructed around my own spirit. You reminded me who I was before fear convinced me to forget. Marcus gazed into her eyes and recognized the woman he had fallen desperately in love with during those golden college years, confident, passionate, absolutely fearless. But he also detected something entirely new, a profound, unshakable serenity. Are you now? He asked, his voice barely audible above the autumn breeze. I'm someone who makes her own choices. Her smile was like dawn breaking over a landscape devastated by war. I'm someone who has finally learned the crucial difference between being rescued and rescuing herself. And what do you choose in this moment? Bella reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his with the practiced ease of a prayer repeated countless times. I choose to discover where this path leads us. If you're interested in exploring it together. Marcus felt something fundamental realign within his chest, not the desperate, consuming hunger that had driven him through 5 years of calculated revenge, but something infinitely more stable, something authentic and sustainable and profoundly real. I'm very interested, he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being, as twilight painted the sky in brushstrokes of rose and gold, casting elongated shadows across the courtyard where their love story had first drawn breath. Marcus and Bella walked hand in hand toward a future they would author together as equals, as genuine partners, as two souls who had finally comprehended that the most powerful love stories aren't about finding completion in another person, but about choosing each other from a foundation of wholeness. Some endings they had both learned through hard-won wisdom were simply beginnings, waiting for the proper moment to reveal their true nature. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.